PWCQP, MWCQP, Rose to Rose, and also My Care. It is an absolute honor to welcome our speaker for today's sharing session. Born in Bethlehem to a refugee family, he has dedicated his life to education, human rights, and global advocacy for Palestine. With a background in sociology and political science from Birzeit University and experience spanning humanitarian work with UNRWA to grassroots initiatives like To Be There, he brings a deeply personal and profound perspective on the reality of living under occupation, the significance of Palestinian identity, and the true meaning of sumud or steadfastness. Through educational initiatives, direct engagement with international communities, and preserving cultural heritage like the sacred olive harvest, he continuously reminds us why we must keep speaking up, educating ourselves, and standing for justice. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Palestinian educator advocate, Mr. Baha Hilo.
Thank you so much, sister. Thank you all for being here today. I have to say that I will forever be indebted to the Women Coalition for being the very first Malaysian organization to actually invite me to Malaysia. So my beginnings with this country would not have happened without the coalition. The talk we will have today is focused on Israel's policies of land theft. The title of the lecture is Land Grab, but we use the word grab because it's not theft. But we have many words that politically correct people like to use as a replacement for the word theft, because what's happening on the land of Palestine is a process of theft of property from the state of Israel, that the state of Israel carries out, and the victims of that theft are usually Palestinian families. The words besides grab that you would hear, like land confiscation, land appropriation, land seizure, acquiring land, developing land, or taking land, but all those terms are terms used as a replacement for the accurate term, which is what's happening actually, is theft of property carried out by the state of Israel. When we're speaking about the land subject to our talk today, we are talking about a small piece of land, which is about 27,009 square kilometers, which we Palestinians call Palestine and Israelis call Israel. But Israel and Palestine are two different words referring to the exact same geography anyways. When it comes to the history of the land, like the documented history of the land, we're talking about nearly 10,000 years of a human evolution happening on this part of the world. That 10,000 years have developed different forms of looking after property, until we came to the times of British rule, where they started destroying our norms of being the custodianship of the land. We don't look at land in its materialistic value. We think of land or believe that land is the source of life. That's what keep us survive day in, day out. The beneficiaries of that land are a minority of the people that you actually see, which are the people that exist today. But land has been looked after by your ancestors, as far back as you can go, and supposed to be passed on to your descendants as far in the future as they can go. So this is why land has a sentimental value for us that goes beyond its materialistic or monetary value. That being said, the land of Palestine is a very rich land, very productive in a way. To just give you an example of what that means, this area of Palestine that is on the west of the, is there a pointer here? Yeah. On the west of the Jordan River is a piece of land that we refer to as the Jordan Valley. It's very interesting. We have some kind of semi-tropical weather there, simply because that land is nearly like 400 meters below sea level. So it's very hot and very good for agriculture. That piece of land is about 1,600 square kilometers. If Palestine is like back in 2011, the World Bank made a research on that part of Palestine, and they found out that if Palestinians would be allowed to use the Jordan Valley, every 3% of Jordan Valley is enough to create revenues that exceed $1 billion. So we're not only talking about the sentimental value of the land, we are also talking about the monetary value that cannot be calculated by today's prices only, because you are thinking of the past price and the future price. This is why like land in Palestine is really priceless. Like you can put a value, but that value is never accurate. This is why we have a norm in Palestine saying like whoever sells a land is a loser. So we don't like encourage like sales of family property, even to another Palestinian family, because at the end of the day, the loser is your descendants, like grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on. So the land of Palestine has its cultural value, it has its monetary value, it also has its religious value, given that prophets walked on throughout Palestine, prophets were born in Palestine, prophets are buried in Palestine. So it gained this like holistic kind of value because of Abrahamic faiths. Who actually owns what kind of property ownership systems do we have in Palestine? Of course, the main ownership is family ownership. Palestinian communities, the size of Palestinian communities is not determined by municipal boundaries, right? It's actually determined by what local families own. Like the community where I live, it's called Beit Sahur. We'll speak about it also in the lecture. It's a community of 7 local families. Those 7 local families make up to nearly 14,000 people, right? Of course, we have Palestinian refugees who live on the property that they rented or purchased from local families, but they continue to be viewed as like outsiders because they're not part of the local families that we have in that town. That being said, like the relations are okay. But like the reason refugees exist in the town of Beit Sahur is political reasons, right? So the size of the town of Beit Sahur is not determined by the municipality. It's determined by what each one of those 7 families own separately, and then the collective size is the size of the town. Make sense? So that's why like private property or family property is the largest kind of property we have throughout the land of Palestine. Non-private properties are like 2 kinds. We have what we call communal land, which is land owned by the community, not by one person from the community. It comes from places where like families did not have anybody to inherit them later on, so like we come together and we decide that the property is used collectively, 1, for grazing if we have animals, and 2, for the poorest families in the community where they can use that land for a maximum of 6 years in order to make income and deal with the challenges of poverty. And then we have a kind of private ownership, but it's not private, it's the waqf land. You know what waqf, right? So it's land that donated by families to religious institutions. We have Islamic waqf, which are the largest owners of property as one owner. So that's the Islamic waqf. And then we have a Christian waqf, which is land also donated to churches. the second largest ownership of property on the land of Palestine is the Greek Orthodox Church. So waqf is not like, it is an Islamic term, but that Islamic term also inspired Christians to follow the system, you know? But it's all waqf land that is used or managed by religious institutions. So in general, the land of Palestine is private, public, and religiously managed, right? That's the land that is subject to theft by the State of Israel. When we speak about land theft, the process of land theft in Palestine started like in a very mild way by the British. You know, the British, when they came to Palestine, came to fulfill, you know, a political vision of establishing a Jewish homeland on the land of Palestine. So the British authorities occupied Palestine for that purpose. In order to facilitate this, the British started confiscating public land from Palestinians and then host European people who were imported to help with the establishment of a Jewish homeland on the land of Palestine, on the lands that were confiscated first by the British. And then we have like a very, very wealthy organization called the World Zionist Organization. You know, they became very popular in the past few days in elections in the US because their arm in the US is called AIPAC, right? It's a very, very, very wealthy kind of organizations. That wealthy organization started to secretly purchase land here and there from large owners of property, usually like our aristocrats. But when people realized that the World Zionist Organization is purchasing land to help with the establishment of Jewish homeland on the land of Palestine, Palestinians naturally started rejecting sales. But all the land that was leaked to Zionists by the British on the land of Palestine was less than 7% of the property of Palestine at the time. In 1947, the UN decided to partition Palestine because for them, they viewed like, you know, it's a piece of land, we just draw borders and we decide this goes to that group of people, that goes to that group of people, without consulting the actual families that live on the land of Palestine, you know? So it's just like a decision that was imposed. When the UN, decided that nearly 54% of the land of Palestine will become a Jewish state, the very first thing Zionists on the land of Palestine did was to mobilize themselves and go carry out a campaign of violence against Palestinian residents, first in the cities, then in towns and villages. That violence resulted on the mass expulsion of nearly 750,000 members of Palestinian families on the land of Palestine. We are talking about 530 cities, towns, and communities that were depopulated. Eventually, like what is this color? This is not white, off-white, you know? This color of Palestine actually ended up being under Zionist control, and that's where the State of Israel was declared. Now, the State of Israel upholds an ideology called Zionism, where the Zionist vision is to turn Palestine into a land without people, right? For people without land. You heard of that, right? Many people think that, Israelis claim or Zionists claim that Palestine is a land without people. No, that's not true. They knew about the people. They expelled those people. But a land without people is a vision rather than a statement. We want Palestine to become a land without people so we can import people without land to live on the land of Palestine. So how do you evict people? Usually the easiest way to evict people is through violence, right? Carry out massacres in nearly 50 different Palestinian communities where you murder as many people as you can, mainly like young adults, you know? And then you create a situation where all the other survivors will flee and escape. That has been working very well for the State of Israel. Even violence in the genocide that we see in Gaza aims at the removal of Palestinians. So because every time we remove Palestinians, we steal their property. And that is the story that has been unfolding for the past 70 plus years. So the founders of the State of Israel, nearly 70,000 militants, carried out this campaign of violence that pushed Palestinians away to a place where they could feel safe, right? Of course, people don't escape violence in order to leave and never come back. People escape violence. When violence settles, people go back, right? We saw that happening with Syria, for example. For 11 years, people were murdering each other in Syria, and now one of the two sides came out victorious. So Syrians who escaped Syria because of that war are now going back to rebuild their lives. That's the norm. What is the thing that prevented Palestinians from practicing that norm after October of 1949? Is it because they didn't want to go back? No. The very first law the State of Israel drafted and passed is a law that is called the Prevention of Infiltration Law. So a family that was, for example, expelled from here to here, were viewed as aliens or strangers or outsiders. So if they try to go back to their homes, they will be deemed infiltrators by the Israeli regime. And those people will be either executed, arrested, or deported. If you check on the news today, you hear about Israelis murdering Palestinians who are trying to get to Jerusalem. Right? A Palestinian from Bethlehem tries to get to Jerusalem, which is 10 minutes down the road. He will be arrested by Israeli authorities, killed, deported back to Bethlehem, or arrested. Because a Palestinian in Palestine is the one who is viewed to be an infiltrator in Israeli legal practices. So it's not that we pushed you and we would allow you to come back. We pushed you, which means we fulfilled our objective, which is removing you from that land. So that's the first law. Any Palestinian who would attempt to go back to his family property on we're talking about nearly 78% of the land of Palestine, anybody who tries to get back will be considered an infiltrator, and it's through the murder of Palestinian refugees who were trying to come back, the rest of Palestinian refugees had it in their mind that if I go back home, I'll be murdered. It's not safe to go back home, So that's the reason why Palestinians, are not able to go back to their property. Second law, you have the property of all Palestinian refugees, right? Which is property that you want to legally take. So what's the second law the Israelis passed? It's called the absentee property law. The State of Israel that put on effort to push those families out is the same state that is preventing those people from getting back to their property, and is the same state that declares those families to be absentees. They are absent, and their property would be transferred to become property of the State of Israel. Just like that. We prevent you from going home, we declare you absent from home, and we confiscate your home. This is how the State of Israel stole the property of nearly 750,000 members of Palestinian families back in 1947, 48, and 49. Now, in 1967, the Israelis completed control of Palestine, but then by occupying the West Bank and Gaza. And they had the exact same objectives, like how to legalize land theft in the occupied territories. And that's what we will be talking more about, simply because that's the issue that is relevant to today's talk. It's part of like what is happening in the occupied West Bank. In the occupied West Bank, the absentee property law is interesting, right? Let me just make it a little bit more interesting. Palestinian displaced persons are refugees who were pushed out of what became the State of Israel, but there are also like many displaced Palestinians who remained within the boundaries of the State of Israel. Those are the so-called Israeli Arabs. They're still like landowners, but the State of Israel want to also steal their land, right? So there's a term within the absentee property law that is called the present absentees, which makes no sense because you are either present or absent, right? The subject to that part of the law are Palestinian survivors of the ethnic cleansing, the Palestinians who remained within the boundaries of what became the State of Israel. So the Palestinians who remained here, Israel calls them Israeli Arabs because Israelis are allergic to the term Palestinian. So they're willing to invent any other terms except of the term Palestinian, which is the most accurate descriptive term when you describe Palestinians in Palestine. So you have nearly 15% of the Palestinian population that remained here. And the State of Israel wants to steal their land. The main victims of land theft are the Palestinian Bedouins who live in the south of Palestine. Bedouins are not gypsies, they are not nomads. Like Bedouins have existed for thousands of years, and they have their own property system. Every tribe lives within what they call their Arab. Arab in this sense is a geographic term, and it means their region. Every family have their own region. Some of them move within those regions, but all of them are, centralized. So you have a small number of Palestinians who own large number of land. So how are you going to steal their land? You consider them present, within Israel's geography, but they're absent from their property. How do you make them absent from their property? You create cages for them, and you tell them that that's the only place where you are allowed to live. The Israelis concentrated Palestinian Bedouins in 7 cages, and any Bedouin who chooses to remain on their family property, their family property and where they live will be considered an unrecognized village, right? A village or a community that is not recognized by the state, which means everything above surface in that community is illegal. So that those people have been chased away for the past 78 years to be locked up in those 7 reservations. But from an Israeli legal point of view, those people are present, but they're absent from their land, and then their land is also confiscated by the state or stolen by the state. We have Palestinians who live in the city of Nazareth, like nearly 40% of the population of Nazareth are displaced persons. They are from communities and villages around Nazareth. So those people are also not allowed to live in their communities, like Kufr Bar'im or the birthplace of Maryam alayhi salam, like Zepuri. Those communities were depopulated, and the families are not allowed access to their property. They are present within the State of Israel, but the State of Israel maintains their absence from their family property, and that's how their property is stolen as well. You guys understand that legalized theft is still theft, right? Yeah? Because legality is a matter of power. It's not a matter of justice, right? If you are a criminal and you are in power, you can legalize your crime. You know, that's kind of a norm. So what the State of Israel is just like legalizing land theft. It doesn't make theft right. It's just like making that just like another crime that the State of Israel legalizes, and they move on with that. When Israel occupied the west bank of the River Jordan, we are talking about territory of 5,500 square kilometers. They ended up with nearly 70% of the Palestinian population in the West Bank and in Gaza refusing to escape, right? So people stayed. So you want, once again, you want the land. So the dilemma the Israelis dealt with ended up being resolved by misinterpretations of the conventions that restrict or design the behavior of an occupying power. And the convention I'm talking about is the Fourth Geneva Convention. So the Fourth Geneva Convention, you know, stately calls on the occupying power to continue to uphold existing civil rules and regulations. Like, let's say, Malaysia will occupy Thailand. You are not allowed, there is tolerance to military occupation. You know, you're allowed to occupy, but you are not allowed to apply Malaysian rules and regulations on the people of Thailand. When the United States occupied Iraq, they did not subject Iraqis to American civil law. They maintained Iraqi civil law, right? So the occupying power have to continue to uphold existing civil rules and regulations. So the Israelis were like, you know, land issues are civil issues. So we are going to apply existing land laws. We don't need to bring in Israeli laws because, you know, we can use any of the past laws to steal land. You know, the objective is to rob Palestinian families of their land. That's the objective. So here's the creative thing that Israelis did, was like they decided that every regime that existed in Palestine that had a land law, that land law will be applicable. You know who controlled the West Bank before the State of Israel? Who called the West Bank the West Bank? Jordanian Kingdom, because the Jordanians ruled that area for 18 years, from 1949 until 1967. So Jordanian land laws are applicable. Who controlled the West Bank before the Jordanians?
British.
The British. British land laws are applicable. Who controlled Palestine before the British? The Ottomans. So Ottoman land laws are applicable. Who was there before the Ottomans? The Mamluks. You know, Salah ad-Din? You know, that era. But they did not have a documented land law. But like if they did, the Israelis would still apply that law. Okay? I'll show you like how the State of Israel steals land based on their use of those laws. We start with the British. The British gave themselves the power to seize land, seize land temporarily, not permanently, temporarily for security purposes. Okay? One of the obvious examples of that is the Israeli security fence, a structure that is nearly 730 kilometers long, which is the black line on this map. Okay? The boundaries between the occupied West Bank and the rest of Palestine is 360 kilometers long. The Israeli wall is about 730 kilometers long. Why? Because it can go sometimes as deep as 20 kilometers inside the occupied West Bank, leaving land on one side and owners of land on the other side. You know? So the Israelis decided to confiscate the land on which this structure is installed, which is, believe it or not, it's nearly 3% of the property of the residents of the West Bank. You know? They decided to confiscate the land on which the structure is physically built for security purposes. So they just like decide that we want this property. They don't care about who owns it. They don't care about who maintains it. They don't care about any Palestinian. In this case, they was like, look, it's for security reasons. Like if you say, but like, you know, what security does it serve? Like, I don't feel safe as a landowner. I was like, no, it's not your security. It's the security of the state, because the state needs security to steal your land. Like, you know, if the state of Israel doesn't feel safe stealing your land, it will not steal your land. So like, they need that kind of safety and security. So the Israeli wall, you know, resulted on the destruction of acres upon acres of property owned by Palestinian families. And it just doesn't make sense because like Palestinians live on both sides of this structure. So if the danger is Palestinian, then you have Palestinians on both sides. And like, well, it's not for the Palestinians, it's for the Jews. I'm like, you have Jewish Israelis living also on both sides. Like on this side of the wall, we have the nearly 400,000 or 500,000 Israeli settlers. So like, what kind of security we're talking about? The only security I found out is that provides the state of Israel with safety and security stealing Palestinian land and dividing Palestinians from Palestinians and dividing Palestinians from their land. Now, this is only relevant to 3% of the property of Palestinian residents. 30% of the property of Palestinian residents of the West Bank is declared closed military zones. Closed military zones, which is land confiscated for security reasons. There's an Israeli report that shows that Israeli security forces use that land for 1 day every 3 months on average, 4 days a year. So the point is not like the Israelis like confiscate your land because they need security for 4 days a year. The reason is like to make sure that you and your family have no access to your property for every single day of the year. I said the British passed that law where they could seize land temporarily, right? But the state of Israel seizes land permanently in practice, but on paper, it's temporary. The actual official translation of the Israeli wall is a temporary security barrier. Temporary, it's not permanent. But like we know that land confiscation goes on from an Israeli point of view permanently, right? But they are willing to use whatever law and whatever interpretation that enables them to rob Palestinian families of their land. So that's how they use the British law. How do they use the Jordanian law? Jordanians, just like any country, like any nation state, has the power and authority to seize private property in order to install public facilities. According to the Jordanian law, if they want to build a highway, if they want to build a school, if they want to build a hospital, and then the property is owned by a private owner, then the authority will confiscate that land and compensate the owner with by 125% of the value of their land, right? It doesn't seem fair, but you know, you want to serve the public. Throughout the West Bank, the Israelis paved the road network, highways, on the property of Palestinian families that's about 1,200 kilometers long. Those highways, the red highways, nearly more than like 2/3 of those highways, are inaccessible by Palestinian residents of the West Bank. So we confiscate your property as a resident of the West Bank to install a public facility. But are you included in the public? You are excluded from the public. Like, for example, this highway is built on the property of the Palestinian community of Beit Jala. You see some of their houses here. None of the landowners are allowed to drive on this road. None of them. As you see, their property is used to build a highway. Their property is used to install a concrete wall, and their property is used to install also a fence wall. Right? So this is part of the Israeli wall. This is part of the Israeli wall. And there's just like 6 kilometers long highway that you can see others driving on your family land, but you are not allowed. You know, land is being confiscated to serve Israeli settlement enterprise in the occupied West Bank, you know, and that land is owned by families, right? So like when Palestinians like go on like hating on Israeli settlers, it's simply because those settlers are the beneficiaries of the stolen land. They are the beneficiaries of stolen property, you know? And
How do they ensure the cost? Palestinian cost?
okay, so how do they make sure that Palestinians are not allowed to drive here? We have a network of military checkpoints on every road, okay? Now the Israelis have car registration system where you label the cars. You label. You know how the Nazis labeled Jews? You know? The Israelis took that strategy of labeling and applied it also on us. So, there are two labels. If you are under Israel civil rule, being one of the survivors of the ethnic cleansing, a Muslim or a Christian, or being a Jewish Israeli, you are subject to Israeli civil laws. Okay? So, this, if you are in this part and Jerusalem, you are subject to Israeli civil laws. And then you drive a vehicle with a yellow label. If you are under Israeli military rule, which is the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, like the Palestinians who live in those houses, you drive a vehicle with a white label. It's a green numbers on a white label. So when these two vehicles, a yellow label and a white label, approach a military checkpoint, the soldier doesn't need to be a genius. They were like, yeah, this vehicle is allowed. This vehicle, it will be shot at if it keeps approaching. You know? And that's how they know. It's not like they check on us. Now, of course, we have labels as well. From the day you are born, the Israeli stamps you with a number, you know? So like when I was born, the number on my birth certificate was issued by the Israelis, right? So I'm labeled as a resident of the West Bank, therefore I'm labeled as a subject to Israeli military rule, not Israeli civil rule. Make sense? We have a lot of labels. The Germans had one label, the Israelis have few, you know? So when it comes to highways and roads, like this is how they would confiscate it. When it comes to settlements, right? Settlements that were built on land stolen by the state of Israel, the settlements are not only residential areas. You also need public facilities in the settlements. You need a school. So you confiscate a family's land to build a school. You need like a power station. You know, we confiscate another family for, you need a bus stop or a bus station. You need a hospital, you know? So all those public facilities are installed on property stolen from Palestinian families, and those families are excluded from the public to begin with. My friend Michael was saved from the United States, you know? In the United States, there is an activist called Rosa Parks that helped with triggering like the part of the success of the civil rights movement. Like she's a very big name. What's the story of Rosa Parks? She refused to sit in the back of the bus. And every white supremacist like went crazy. Like, ah, you know, she's destroying the norms. What if Rosa Parks was a Palestinian? who owns land that was confiscated to install a bus stop, right? And then the bus stops on her land. Rosa Parks in Palestine is not allowed to get on the bus to begin with. Is not allowed to sit on the front of the bus. You are not allowed on the bus that leaves off your family's property. You know? So that's how they use or abuse the Jordanian land law. Okay? To make things worse, the Israelis sometimes offer you compensation. And it's really worse than not offering anything. Because the compensation is 125% of the value of your land back in 1967. Yeah. Because the law was applicable until 1967. Right? That is, you know, and they just like move on with that. Everything is legal. The land that is not stolen based on Israel's abuse of Jordanian law or Israel's abuse of British law will be stolen by Israel's abuse of the Ottoman laws. You know, the first people to actually say like the state would run the natural reserves and forests and so on were in the beginning the Ottomans. The Ottomans were busy building a huge railway to connect Istanbul with Jeddah in Saudi and the Arab Peninsula. And they needed like forests for wood along the line. So they would take over places, consider them like natural reserves, build or plant trees that are good for wood. And that's what you have in a lot of places from Istanbul all the way to Jeddah, including in Palestine. The Israelis worked actually in 1969, 1970, 1971 to plant pine trees on different properties inside the West Bank. They sometimes like would bring you the trees. It was like, you know, those trees are yours. Just plant them. And then people planted. Some people planted pine trees on their land, and then 10 years later, their land was confiscated for being natural reserves. Yeah, it's a forest. I don't trust a Palestinian to run a forest, you know? But we have to maintain those forests. And then you see how those forests are kind of maintained. In this case, like that forest outdates the state of Israel, but it's one of many forests that ended up being confiscated under the pretext of natural reserves.
But the pine trees are not very suitable.
No. We have a distinct type of pine that produces the pine nuts, right? But those are slow-growing pine trees, and those are the pine trees that you find in the Levant area. The pine trees that the state of Israel covered Palestine with are wild pines that were brought from Northern Europe, you know? The founder of the state of Israel, a criminal called, what's his name? Ben Gurion, David Ben Gurion, yeah. He had a vision of creating the Switzerland of the Middle East. So like, pine trees are all over Switzerland. So like when you cover Palestine with pine trees, anybody from Switzerland comes to Palestine in the winter and is like, oh, I feel like home. Coming to Palestine in summer, oh, I feel like I'm in hell. You know? Because it's too hot in Palestine. Land that is not confiscated through the previous 3 terms, don't worry. We can use the Islamic law. In 1853, the Ottoman Empire wanted to collect taxes. I don't know what palaces they were busy building. They wanted money. And they introduced the first property, tax property law in 1853. They said the following: any land that is not cultivated will be declared property of the emir, the prince, the state. You know, why did they do that? They did that because they want property to be registered so they can impose property tax. And they wanted also land to be worked. You know, because if you work the land, you make income, we impose income tax, right? Now, it's not about like the morality of the law, it's about the practicality of the law. The Israelis found out that law and decided that we will continue to apply it. But the land that we will confiscate, we are not going to carry it and give it to Turkey simply because the Ottomans are from there and the Ottomans are the ones who made the law. No, we will confiscate the land and declare it state land for the State of Israel, even though the State of Israel did not exist back in 1853. And because it's an Ottoman law, Israelis promote that as the Islamic law, which actually means the State of Israel would use anything, including Islam, if that enables them to rob a Palestinian family of their property. Okay? So what's the first thing you need for land cultivation? And don't say water.
Access.
Access, exactly. You need access. The State of Israel prevents you sometimes physical access to your land. Like, for example, this is an Israeli wall that separates the residents of Beit Sahur, I live in this community, from their property on the other side. Like nearly 68% of the property of the residents of Beit Sahur is on the other side of the fence. So that wall or fence that destroyed part of the property of the residents of Beit Sahur and separated the residents from their land, you know, is an actual obstacle that prevents people access to their land. That was installed in 2005. By 2012, their land and property was declared abandoned. Yeah. One of 4 families who own property over there challenged this decision in an Israeli court. And the Israeli court decided that the existence of the security barrier is not an obstacle for land cultivation. Yeah, yeah. And just like that, their property was confiscated. What if there is no wall between you and your land? Like, let's say you're in this part. What do you need to cultivate your land if it's accessible? And here you talk about water. We have situations where your land is used by Israeli authorities to dig trenches for water, you know, to install water pipes. So the water is literally going through your land, and you are not allowed access to that water, you know? And the Israelis say, like, no, we cannot install a water meter because there's no household on the land. Like, there's no house. How are we going to install a water meter? I'm like, okay, I want to build a house on my land. Oh, you're not allowed to build the land on your house, or a house on your land, a land in your house. Because our lands are actually in our minds. So it makes sense. You're not allowed to build a house on your land because your land is reserved for agriculture. You know? So if you want to get out of this, and you're like, you know, in Palestine, it rains 22 times a year. You know, that's what happens in our winter. So you want to dig a hole in the ground to collect rainwater. You're not allowed to do that. The State of Israel actually sends bulldozers to destroy water cisterns. So it's not that you're not allowed access to the water in the pipes, you are not allowed access to water whatsoever. The State of Israel made it impossible for people to literally like cultivate their land, you know, let alone making an income out of land cultivation. Years and years of this practice shows that Palestinians, you know, cannot afford cultivating their land, right? And then, well, your land is not cultivated, it means you're lazy, you're unworthy, you do not deserve that land, your land will be confiscated. according to Islamic rules by the State of Israel. You know? Those are the methods that the State of Israel continues to apply day in, day out, to the point where the State of Israel made sure that the only thing in common between all Palestinians on the planet today is that we are all born to families that were robbed completely or partially of our family property and inheritance. So this process of land theft is a process that goes hand in hand with Israel's practices on the land of Palestine. If none of those laws enable the State of Israel to steal your land, what do they say? Well, this land was given to us by God. Even though, like, I heard it from like many white people saying, like, we lived here 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. I was like, you don't look that old, right? But like, yeah, who gave you that land? Well, God gave us this land. It's like, well, you're a Zionist. You don't believe in God. And it's like, I'm a secular Jew. It's like, it's just like, you can't say like, or I don't know, like I heard many people who are inspired by this Zionist view of like secular Jews, where I heard about people being secular Muslims and secular Christians. But like, you're either a man of God or you are a secular person, you know? But like, you know, if you are greedy, you want to be both. So be both. You know, but the best way to describe Zionists when it comes to land theft is what an Israeli historian called Elam Pape said once. Zionists are a bunch of people who do not believe in God, but nevertheless believe God gave them Palestine. So it's not that the Israelis are willing to only exploit Islam to rob Palestinians of their land, or the British or the Jordanians, but they are willing to also exploit God if that means robbery of property from Palestinian families. So that is the process that has been going on, and it will actually stop once the State of Israel have completely controlled every inch of the land of Palestine. The State of Israel does not steal land from Palestinian families to give it to Jewish families. That's a wrong assumption. The State of Israel steals land, like in this case of Beit Zahur, for example. The State of Israel stole the land from the Palestinian families. The State of Israel built homes on the land of the Palestinian families. The State of Israel made sure that none of those Palestinian families will be allowed to live in the houses that the State of Israel built on the Palestinian families' land, you know? And then they sell this land for cheap to Jewish Israeli beneficiaries. If you buy the house, it doesn't mean you own the land. It means you only own the structure. And what you pay the Israeli government, even though it sounds cheap, but you pay the Israeli government up to 400% of the money that the Israeli government paid to build that housing unit. So the reason those housing units for settlers are cheap is very simple. The most expensive part of your house is not the structure, it's the land on which the structure is built. How much money did the Israeli government pay for this land? Zero. So they need a Jewish Israeli person to settle on this land in order to continue legalizing land theft. So like, I can't give the land back because now there's a poor Jewish family living on it. And like, yeah, it's like me stealing your car and renting to a friend of mine. And like, you want your car back. And I was like, well, I can't give you your car back because my poor friend is using it. Like, so my poor friend is not allowed to give you your car back. If you try to get that car, you will be killed. You know? And that is how it continues to happen until today. Yeah, I'll stop here and I'll be open for questions.
Isn't there any lawyer that can fight this?
Yeah, there are a lot of lawyers. There are a lot of lawyers, but in the end of the day, like, remember, you're not allowed to challenge Israeli decisions in international courts. You're allowed to challenge Israeli decisions in Israeli courts. So the family from Beit Saud, like, there are, like, the state of Israel is a state of laws, right? They will allow you to, like, have legal representation. They invite you sometimes to challenge their decisions. Like when they want to declare your abandoned land, state land, you know how they do it? We are talking about a high-tech state, right? Israelis like promote themselves as like a high-tech, blah, blah, blah. And they know actually where each and every Palestinian live in Palestine, because from the day we are born, they have to monitor us. Yeah. When it comes to land confiscation, they make the declaration, which is a printed piece of paper, and they go to the land. If they are kind, they will place the paper under a rock so it would not fly away. Yeah. If they are not kind, they will leave it. And part of the text say, like, if you have any objections, here's the court that you can go and challenge a decision at. And you have a period of time that sometimes is 6 months. But there are so many families that actually their land is already confiscated and they have no idea. Because they never saw the paper, they never received the paper.
Also,
Yeah.
a lot of the Israeli lawyers who you mentioned, one of the cases where they did attempt to appeal one of these decisions, that since the genocide began on October 7, like these Israelis who are attempting to fight for the Palestinians are facing a lot of themselves violence and repression, and they are leaving Israel, so there is even less attempts to stop now.
The state of Israel has court systems that go silent whenever you say security, right? We want this land for security, and security is the safety and security the state of Israel wants as it goes on oppressing and murdering Palestinians. Just like, all the Israeli soldiers that been participating in the genocide, they deserve safety and security. The state of Israel protects them. It's not like we protect murderers and criminals. And it's like, we have. It's like the safety and security a rapist needs to have when he's committing his crime. But in the end of the day, he's criminal. So Israeli criminals want safety and security, Yeah, but you understand how weird it is that a Palestinian is invited to legally challenge an Israeli decision where he's represented by an Israeli lawyer in an Israeli court. You understand that? And many of us, because of despair, are willing to go that far. I have friends who've been in Israeli courts since 1991. Since 1991. Only to prove that their family property is their family property. They have documents from 1921. Because the state of Israel does not update land registration systems. And that's just another thing. How are you going to prove that your family property is your family property? Well, here's a document from 1921. I've seen documents from 1907. It's like, those belong to museums, But why is it that the Israelis want you to, keep digging? If you don't have documents from early 1900s, then the land is not yours. Like, okay, I do have witnesses, my neighbors. We don't take their testimonies, So it's the process is clear. The state of Israel wants to rob you and your family of your property and inheritance, and that's the direction they go into. If you want to stop it, they will make it as inconvenient as possible, There are families whose proven that their land was not abandoned, but then they were hit with a security purpose. And it's like, so just say you want to steal my land and steal it. You know, it's like this Jacob the settler from New York who was telling a Palestinian, like, if I don't steal your land, somebody else will steal it. So it's not like, because he comes from that mindset. Like, our job is to rob Palestinians of their property. If I, as an individual, do not want to participate in the robbery, well, there are other individuals who are willing to do them. So at least I'm a kind thief. You might end up with a thief who will kill you. And we do have those, like, Israelis who are willing to murder Palestinians on their land. Just like 10 days ago, or like not last Friday, the Friday before, a family of 4, 2 sets of cousins, you know, one man and his brother and their cousin, and they were going to their family property. An Israeli settler, armed with a machine gun and a handgun, started like harassing them to push them out of their land. He was pointing the machine gun at one of them, clashes happened, a Palestinian took his gun away from him, so he reached to his handgun to kill that Palestinian. So that Palestinian, who got the gun from the settler, used the settler's gun to protect himself, you know, and then ended up killing a settler, and another settler wanted to kill him, shot the other settler. Mind you, that's a Palestinian who never touched a gun, you know? And then the Israeli army showed up, killed the 4 cousins, killed them, and then the settlers confiscated the family land to build a memorial for the 2. So these 2 settlers turned out to be like Israeli soldiers who served in the genocide in Gaza, you know? So anything, the state of Israel will kill you and confiscate your land, will have Israelis killed and confiscate your land, and it's like, you know, they will use anything to fulfill the purpose of land theft. This is why, like, just don't bother interacting with this rogue state. Just don't bother. The only way for this, for the only form of interaction we have with this regime is that for that regime to be abolished. As like a previous Swedish prime minister said in 1986, I think, Olof Palme, he said about apartheid, that apartheid cannot be reformed, it has to be abolished. He was mysteriously murdered like a week after he made this statement. But this is true, like apartheid cannot be reformed. It has to be abolished. Land theft cannot be reformed. It has to be abolished, you know? How can we abolish the state of Israel? The state of Israel, just like any other regime, they have resources, right? Where are their resources? Their physical, materialistic resources and cultural resources come from the United States and Europe. As long as those channels are open, the state of Israel will continue to oppress and murder and destroy life. So like when those supplies come to an end, this regime will find it impossible to sustain itself. So we will replace like Jewish social nationalism with democracy. Because Zionism is a Jewish form of social nationalism. The only way for social nationalism to come to an end is by boycotting it, by imposing sanctions on it. How did apartheid South Africa collapse? By sanctions. And of course, like the white supremacists in the south of Africa, they were like, well, if there is justice and equality, if there's no apartheid, like the blacks will eat us, right? So like, what, from 1994, that's when democracy happened in South Africa. We are 2026. I'm still waiting to see the first white supremacist in the south of Africa to be eaten by an indigenous person. But they were very confident about it. Now Israelis and beneficiaries of like Zionism in the land of Palestine, they say like, if we allow those families to come back, they will eat us. I'm like, well, they're not cannibals. The only reason Palestinians will continue to use violence against the state of Israel is because of that theft and that oppression. You remove the theft, you remove the oppression, it will be like a Jewish Israeli person running against a Palestinian person in the elections in the United States of America. It happens. Like, why can a Palestinian and a Jewish Israeli person, they would hate each other, and live in the same, sometimes like apartment building, hating each other. But they will not harm each other. Why? Because both are standing equal before the law. That's it. We do not have that in the land of Palestine because equal before the law is something that Jewish social nationalism cannot tolerate. They cannot tolerate that. Equality goes completely against, the foundations of the Israeli regime. So if we want equality, we have to remove the foundations of that Zionist regime. Malaysia is doing its part very well. The Prime Minister the other day said something that many people in Europe are echoing now. That's why Malaysia has an ethical role to play in the international community, where he said that any Israeli that is found in Malaysia will be arrested and deported. Yes. That's it. Yes. And many people are echoing that in Europe. So Malaysia is doing its role when it comes to what to do to help abolishing that. Also, Malaysia's position is consistent with Malaysia's position towards apartheid South Africa. It's not that they normalized with apartheid South Africa because, it has been going on for so long. No. As long as there is apartheid in South Africa, we do not want to have any connection with that regime. As long as there is apartheid in Palestine, we do not want to have connection with that regime. And then Malaysia was right regarding apartheid South Africa. Malaysia is right regarding apartheid in Palestine. And we just need to help market Malaysia as an example. And I've heard many people in Europe echoing what the Prime Minister have said, because the public are ready to just get rid of Israeli criminals. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Any more questions? Mhm. Yeah, tell me.
Do you see any possibility that the break of this Israeli is from within? Because now you see that
From within.
From within, because you see now the Israeli demonstrating and against the genocide in Gaza, or is that an act?
Okay, doctor.
I don't know whether is it possible that they are digging their hole bigger and bigger or something?
Okay. Change from within is some kind of a drug you give to liberals to tolerate reality. There's I've not seen change happen from within. There's always external pressure to enforce change. Improvement happens from within. So Israelis who do not like the image of the State of Israel as a genocidal regime, because of that image, they might try to reform themselves to sound like we're not genocidal. But it has nothing to do with holding the criminals who committed that genocide responsible. Because the system itself is a corrupt system. So if you want a racist and corrupt system to change, it will continue being, from within it will continue to maintain corruption. Why? Because Israelis are beneficiaries of corruption. Israelis are beneficiaries of stolen goods. So justice means that you need to stop benefiting from stolen goods. Justice means that those stolen goods have to be, used by the ones that you stole them from. So there's no Israeli, even on the extreme far radical left in the State of Israel, it's very difficult for those Israelis to believe that they are what they are, beneficiaries of stolen goods. And that's it. And then they do benefit, but the ultimate beneficiary is the actual thief, which is the regime, the state itself. Because once again, the state of Israel does not steal land from a Palestinian family to give it to a Jewish family. And even that rejection is for a reason. Because they don't want to come to a situation where a Jewish owner of the land will wake up and say like, I need to give that land back to a Palestinian family. Because if you want to try to do that, you are in direct conflict with the thief. You are in direct conflict with the state. The state will not allow you to do that. If you don't want to benefit, get out. We will import another beneficiary. You know? But like, if people think that change can come from within the state of Israel, it's like, it's a recipe for just submission to reality. There is no positive change that will come out of that corrupt regime or that racialist society. And like the Israeli society operates like a typical racialist society, you know, in terms of their norms, their behavior, their like everything is like kind of typical. So a racialist society needs therapy, you know, more than being allowed to reform things. We have any more? Yes.
What do you think about the Board of Peace?
What do I think of the Board of Peace?
Yes.
You know, Trump wants to benefit from land theft as well. You know? So why just to allow the state of Israel to benefit? Because like the Board of Peace or whatever it is made by like corrupt people who care about the state of Israel more than the state of Israel sometimes care about itself. But they also want to benefit. So it's a board that wants to legalize genocide, a board that wants to legalize oppression, a board that wants to legalize Israel's annexation of most of the 70% of the land of Gaza anyways. So it's just like a corrupt kind of system that a corrupt initiative came out of corrupt like politicians, you know? But yeah, they wrongly call themselves, they are a board to provide peace for the state of Israel because like, you know, the Israelis want peace, you know, which means we don't want our criminals to live in an annoying place. We want our criminal to sleep peacefully in their beds, you know? Yeah. Any more questions? Okay. Did I go beyond my time? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Baha Hilo, for such an profound, eye-opening, and deeply moving sharing session. You have given us a powerful, sobering look into the reality of the land theft and a vital reminder of why we must stand firmly for justice and the right to exist on one's own land. To show our deep gratitude and appreciation for your time and invaluable insights today, I would like to invite Dr. Fauzia Hassan to come out and present a token of appreciation to our esteemed speaker. Please let us welcome Dr. Fauzia Hassan.
Thank you so much for the.
Oh no, for the what? Thank you so much for you calling my presentation small. I know. The only one told
Okay.
All right, thank you so much to everyone who actually attended today, and inshallah there will be more and more sessions in the future. Thank you so much, and have a great day today. Assalamu alaikum.